What's up, everybody? Today, we're going to do my top 10 horror movies of all time. As you guys know, I'm a big movie buff. Maybe you don't know, but you know now. So, let's go ahead and jump into things here with number 10. Number 10 is The Den. The Den is a movie based on this girl using this live webcam chatting service on the internet, much like Chat Roulette or Omegle. However, her life spirals out of control when she comes across this one strange user who sends her a video clip of a girl being murdered. Her personal life ends up being at risk as this person hacked her entire computer. I thought it was a really cool concept, something that can actually happen to you if you're not careful enough on the internet. This movie did a very good job at keeping viewers on the edge of their seats. Number 9 is Henry, the Portrait of a Serial Killer. This 80s classic is a movie that profiles a town-to-town serial killer. He then moves to Chicago with a fellow roommate. The roommate's sister then comes to Chicago and stays with them and pursues a career in hairstyling, I believe, and actually develops a bit of a close relationship with Henry, the killer, throughout the movie. Henry is obviously deeply troubled. He then goes on to kill a couple hookers, I believe, with his roommate, which then causes them to go on this massive killing spree. Let me just say that this movie is not your typical 80s slasher film. It's got eeriness, it's dark, it's evil. You know, there's nothing really comical about it. It's actually quite unpleasant. Number 8 is American Psycho. Another serial killer movie that takes place in the 80s, however, is not actually filmed or released in the 80s. It was released in 2000, I believe so. 2001, 2000, around there. This movie shows a Wall Street New Yorker who's actually got this perfect life going on. He's got a good job, a nice apartment, but inside he has this inner dark side. He's a serial killer. But over time you question whether or not he is actually killing these people or he's just imagining things as the movie starts to take a few psychological twists. This movie takes you on a bizarre psychological trip. Number 7 is Hostel. The movie that actually made me fear hostels for a long, long time. There's basically 3 backpackers who travel to Europe and stay in this hostel full of girls, but they don't know that this hostel has this deep, dark secret behind it. After one night, they notice that one of their friends goes missing, and they scatter the whole area to try and find him. Eventually, the second guy goes missing, and the first guy goes to look for him, and eventually finds himself at this warehouse where this really sick and twisted old man is torturing and killing people. It's quite the gory film that keeps you on the edge of your seat, for sure. Number 6 is The Ring. The Ring actually had a pretty cool concept. Basically, there's this strange videotape going around that kills anybody who watches it. After they watch it, they get a phone call telling them that they have 7 days to live. It's actually this really creepy voice that whispers, 7 days. A reporter begins investigating these cases of these kids dying from watching this tape. But after her and her kid watch the tape, it becomes almost this race against time to figure out the mystery behind the tape. It's a pretty cool movie. Number 5 is Friday the 13th. This is just one of the best 80s slasher films out there. It's truly a classic movie. Definitely a classic in the horror field of movies. It does a really good job at putting fear in the viewer's eyes, and it's obviously a nostalgic film. It's really basically a series of murders that happen at Camp Crystal Lake, but there is a backstory. See, the movie takes place in 1979, but they go back to 1957, where a boy named Jason was killed in the lake. I believe he drowned. You flash forward back to 1979, and it is believed that he has come back to kill basically everyone on the camp. Number 4 is Sinister. This is basically a story of a crime writer who moves into this new house with his family where in the past a horrible murder took place. His family does not know about it though, of course. He starts looking into the crime so he can write a book about it and keep his career as a book writer relevant. He then finds multiple tapes of snuff films that are actually quite graphic. He then notices a figure known as Mr. Boogie in each of the films, which he continues to investigate more and more. Could this be the biggest mistake he's made in his lifetime? Starting to sound like a movie trailer, but I'll leave that for you to decide. Number 3, Paranormal Activity, the first one obviously. This movie actually had a really cool concept when it first came out. Basically, a young middle-class couple move into this tract house in the suburbs, but over time they get more and more disturbed by some sort of presence that could possibly be demonic. And it's mostly active in the middle of the night when they sleep. I would not recommend watching this movie before bed. And I will say that the sequels to this movie were not nearly as good as the first movie. They've tried to reclaim that glory that they had after the first movie, but it just didn't have the same spark. Number 2 is Carrie, the 70s version. This 1970s classic tells the story of a girl named Carrie, who grew up in complete isolation because of her overly protective religious mother. After something embarrassing happens to her in the gym showers at her school, her classmates begin to ridicule her and make fun of her until the teacher disciplines them. But one student feels sympathy for Carrie and actually asks her to go to the prom. There's obviously that one group of students that have this humiliating plot that will ruin Carrie at the prom, which causes her to literally unleash hell on everybody. The ending is brilliantly dark and terrifying. I love it. Number 1, The Shining. The Shining depicts a writer, Jack Torrance, played by Jack Nicholson. He basically signs a contract to look after this hotel that has a very dark and violent past, and it puts everyone in a freaky situation. Jack begins to get more and more angry and more violent over time, and his son Danny goes through his own weird psychological torment. This movie is so eerie, it's so dark and psychological. There's a lot of mystery and darkness behind it, even Easter eggs. It's truly one of the most perfect horror films out there. It's one of the best. Trust me. And that concludes my top 10 horror movies of all time. Thank you guys for watching. Feel free to click that subscribe button, and feel free to comment your top 10 horror movies of all time. Rock on.